This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast, and on this episode, we revisit our last topic of micro-targeting and go in depth on the importance of retail and walkability in a neighborhood. We also get a quick temperature check from Mike Ferrante on the Cleveland real estate market, and so much more coming up on this episode. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, this is Mike Ferrante with Century 21 Homestar and the 21 Mike team. And let's be honest, sometimes selling a house can be a real hassle. If you're in the Heights area, you have to worry about those pesky point of sale violations. You have to do other preparations to get your house ready for showings. And what about staging? That's why we work with Riley Painting and Contracting to help sellers get top dollar for their house. So give us a call at 216-373-7727 or email info@21mike.com. The 21 Mike team, your one-stop shop for buying and selling.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday. Beautiful spring day in Cleveland. I'm actually shocked by how nice it is. About 75 degrees. And with me is my wingman, Mike Ferrante. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, good morning, Mike. What do you mean shocked by the weather? It's always 70s and sunny in Cleveland.
Well, folks, I just had the good fortune of, after my second shot and waiting the appropriate amount of time, my wife and I went down to Miami Beach. And a couple of days ago, the weather was actually warmer in Cleveland than it was in Miami Beach. So it was 83 in Cleveland on Wednesday, and it was 78 in Miami Beach, thanks to the ocean breeze, which knocked the temperature down a little. So, but coming back Friday night to 70 degrees is as opposed to a April snowstorm is nice to see. So I hope you had a good week, Mike, enjoying the weather.
Yeah, interesting. I can't remember if it was last week or I think it was last week. We had snow one day, and in the same week we hit 79.
Yep. Well, I keep saying to people in Cleveland, you get all four seasons in 1 week. So
Right.
Just wait, and the weather will change. But next week's supposed to be, spring-like, upper 50s, no rain. We're getting some rain tonight. But I know our listeners out there, which are starting actually to grow, Mike. We're getting a podcast count. So amazingly, people are interested in what we have to say.
Well, yeah, I'm not amazed by it, Mike. There's a lot of, as we've said, there's a lot of people out there peddling information that isn't always 100% accurate. And of course, a lot of these things we say are our opinions, but our opinions are based on decades of experience doing what we do. So I think it's,
right.
I think people appreciate our direct approach to the information.
Well, and that's going to be the subject of our podcast today, following up on what we talked about last week about micro-targeting neighborhoods. And I could say, yes, I have decades of experience, in the residential contracting and helping people get ready to sell, helping them deal with the city. So decades of experience with that. But I do not have decades of experience dealing with the LA market coming to Cleveland. So before we do a deep dive into micro-targeting, let's get the latest temperature check of the Cleveland real estate market.
Yeah. So interesting little tidbit for you this week, Mike. This typifies what's going on right now. So two different clients reached out to me, potential clients, I should say, reached out to me. Hey, we're selling real estate in California, and we're going to do a 1031 exchange. We have about between 1 million and 1.5 million to invest. Can you get me something that cash flows? And of course, the answer is a resounding yes. But we're seeing more and more of that. People who can't get good cash flow or aren't getting enough cash flow from their investment saying, where can I reinvest this money? And the 1031, of course, is a brilliant tool to defer your capital gain tax. But that is what's going on, Mike. It's still happening. Even though prices are rising here, the returns are still tempting to folks outside of our market because it's still such a disparity between the purchase prices and the rents and the rate of return that you can get on the rents.
So tell our listeners a little bit more deep dive on the 1031.
I know enough to be dangerous, but here's what I can tell you. You decide that you're going to sell a property, and then you get that property under contract or even sell it, but you have to identify that you're going to do a 1031 exchange and hire a 1031 exchange expert. Our guy is based out of Columbus, the guy that we recommend, but there are others. And you have to get someone who is qualified and licensed to do a 1031 exchange. Then you have a certain amount of time. I want to say it's 180 days, maybe it's 90 days, to identify properties that you can swap out. And the rules get a little fuzzy there. It can be based on number of properties. It could be based on dollar amounts. But the idea is that if you redeploy your cash, at least the amount of the capital gain or more, you can defer paying any taxes on that money until such time as you sell properties and don't redeploy the cash using a 1031 exchange.
Right. Speaking of selling in California and buying in Cleveland, I had a conversation, a back and forth with a client a couple of weeks ago, and if she's listening to that, she'll know who she is. And of course, she's interested in buying property in Cleveland as an investment, and she's doing a great job studying up on investing. She's a doctor. That's all I'm going to identify her as, but she's got together with other doctors, and they've taken, I think they either taken or consider taking a seminar in investing in real estate. And I was talking to her about areas in Cleveland, again, the micro targeting. She identified a couple homes through her real estate person, or on Zillow or MLS or whatever. She's getting this information, and I told her these are not good areas to invest in. And then it sort of dawned on me. I said, you might want to think about the investment property you're buying, a nice property that can also be your landing pad if you decide to sell in LA and actually move to Cleveland. Because I've heard a lot of people talking about just moving one way out of California. They're going to Idaho, they're going to Wyoming. I mean, I'm talking to a guy, at our hotel a couple of days ago, and he's got a business in one of those ski resorts in Jackson Hole. And he was telling me, hey, he's got people that are buying there, and it's one way. They're hiring a moving company, and they're not moving back to California. They are out of there.
Mike, there's two Facebook groups that I know of that are devoted just to that. My friend Terry Gilliam is his name. He created a Facebook group called Leaving California. Look it up if you get a chance. And the other one is called Life After California. And there's literally tens of thousands of members of each of these groups. I think one is 50 or 60,000 and the other one's 70 or 80,000 members of people, like-minded people who are leaving the state for one reason or another, or have left the state and stay in the Facebook group to guide those who want to follow in their footsteps. So, hey, I'm thinking about moving, going to Texas. That's one of the hot landing spots for people. And they're saying, where should I look? Where can I find a moving company? But the thing is, the moving trucks have gotten so expensive because they're all going one way. None of them are coming back. So it's getting more and more expensive just to leave California. Just as one example, of course, we're focusing on our Californians because we've had a couple clients the last couple of weeks, but it's just one example.
Yeah, well, that's what my guy was saying at the hotel pool, that it was double the expense because there's nothing to move back to California to. So that's an interesting phenomenon. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense, because with the virus and working remotely and Zoom, you can work from a lot of places. And if you're not locked into California, what I mean locked in is that you didn't grow up there, you weren't born there, you don't have family roots, you sort of relocated maybe 20 years ago. I mean, my client, she relocated from New Hampshire and did her medical degree in UCLA, but she's not locked into California. I mean, obviously her kids have grown up there, but when you really think about the quality of life, the traffic, the drought, the fires, the cost of living, the taxes, you can really see why people are starting to exit. And
Yeah,
what better place to exit to but in a city like Cleveland, maybe a city like Indianapolis, which is another growing market, but these kind of Midwest cities that are now going through a renaissance.
Yeah, exactly. And the one issue you didn't mention, and I'm not trying to pile on California, but they're very open about talking about it, is their enormous homeless problem also.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Well, we had a guest on about 6 months ago, Ralph Dice, who has an executive recruitment company for Cleveland, and they bring in their headhunters. And folks may want to scroll through the directory and listen to Ralph's take on Cleveland. It was really interesting. And this was 6 months ago. And he said that executives that come in, they all go through the 5 stages of moving into Cleveland. First, they hear they're moving into Cleveland, they're getting relocated, and their friends are commiserating with them. And of course, they buy a 6-bedroom mansion for $500,000. So right away, they're moving into a house, a major upgrade over the 3-bedroom house they were living in California that cost $1 million. And now they're moving into, say, Shaker Heights or Cleveland Heights, and they're living in a beautiful house built in the 20s, couple fireplaces, brick, big backyard, walk to a golf course, private schools, great schools are in the area. They've got takeout, they've got good restaurants, they've got the Cleveland Orchestra, they got I'm not trying to sound like a Cleveland booster, but they move into Cleveland and within 3 months, they're just so happy. Right. And then they get relocated. They get relocated, say, back to California. Now they're crying. They have to go back. They have to go back to the traffic and the cost of living. And so, hey, it's worth considering, people out there who are buying investment property in Cleveland. This might be your next home in 5 years. So, or somebody in, say, outside of the country who's looking for, property in the U.S. who said, I may want to move to the United States, and here I've got a house waiting for me. Your thoughts?
Yep. Well, yeah, and Ohio did make the top 10 states to retire to as well. And one of the reasons was the affordability. Of course, you have to be okay with winters, but our winters are kind of hit or miss lately. Last couple winters have been fairly mild, or at least last winter was fairly mild. But the change of seasons is actually nice, and guys like you and me get to go somewhere warm for a week here and there, to get a little respite from the cold. But certainly I'm seeing a good number of people relocating from these more expensive places to get relief from all those things that we talked about, in addition to the folks that are bringing their money here just to invest.
Well, when you think about Cleveland, people say, well, we don't, our winters are not horrendous like Cleveland. I think it's almost laughable because January and February and parts of March can be a little grim, but then you think about global warming and the impact on our winters, which may not be as bad. You're not going to see those polar vortexes coming down where it's like 0 degrees. But let's just say, all right, you've got 2 bad months, maybe January and February, where it's a little grim. Okay, you get away, you go down a 3-hour direct flight to Miami Beach, you just hang there for a week, you just kind of warm up, you take some of the edge off. But think about coming from California, coming from Arizona. Hey, yeah, sure, January and February is nice, but would you want to live there in July?
Right, yeah.
when it's 120? Or how about Texas? I mean, I hear people, they don't even go outdoors in June, July, and August. It's so hot.
Yeah, we were in Texas, and my one buddy, we stepped out of the restaurant we were in. This was a couple of years ago, and he looked at me and he said, my face is melting off. That's how hot it was.
Yeah, and global warming, it's just only going to get worse. But okay, enough of boosterism for Cleveland.
Right.
Mike, let's get into the meat and potatoes of our podcast, which is the micro targeting. Now, one thing we have started to do in the last couple of weeks, because we are just getting bombed with calls coming into our office for property managers, or I'm thinking of buying a property here, I'm thinking of buying a property there, is we've started to set up 1 hour private consultings for these people. For $275, you get a 1 hour private consulting Zoom with a couple of our people. We outline the areas that we think they should invest in. Most of the time, if not all the time, we are telling them, do not buy in this area. It is about to be clear cut and raised, literally. I'm thinking of parts of East Cleveland, which are now just the vacancy rate in some of these properties is so high, they're just demolishing whole neighborhoods. And that house that you're looking at for $20,000 in 5 years could be gone and demolished. Also, areas, say the Royal Heights area, where they've already reached their peak. They're not getting any higher, I don't think. And to buy a house in there, you're looking at getting into a bidding war. So we are recommending to people to get into micro-targeting areas which are going to be ascending within the 5-year period window, and will give you a great opportunity to buy on the low end with say a 5% appreciation in property values every year for the next 5 years. Plus, you'll be able to get a good rent income. Additionally, within our $275 1 hour private consulting, we'll be able to get a little bit of insight into property inspections. And here, in some cases, if they're on the verge of buying a property, they will want to use our services as property inspectors. And of course, we charge a fee for that, depending on how many pages of violations there are. But most of the time, I'm seeing people get into a bidding war for properties and not realize that if they buy that property, they could be looking at spending $20,000 or $30,000 more just to make it habitable or rentable.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've got two comments that I wanted to make. So number one, the most current comment there about the inspection, we just had one of these where you had someone who was buying a property at the 11th hour. They had you look at it and uncovered, I think you said around $20,000 in work that they didn't realize
More.
that going to, 20 or more, this is all work that they would have been blindsided by. So the difference between what you do and what a regular home inspector will do is that, you are not only you're a contractor in addition to having skilled people to put eyes on a property. What inspectors don't do is give you pricing. So certainly after your home inspection, you can hire a contractor, try to get the pricing that you need, but it's often difficult to arrange all these different visits to the property. So having someone like you that does both things is really valuable. And someone may look at something and go, "Oh, that's probably $500," and next thing you know, well, no, that's $5,000 because of this, this, and this. The second thing, and I'm putting my broker hat on for a second, Mike, and that means a disclaimer is coming. The consultation is with Mike Riley. Mike Ferrante is a real estate broker. I have to be careful about telling people, "Oh, buy here, don't buy there." There's a word for that in the real estate community.
Redlining.
It's steering, redlining, those types of things.
Yeah.
And so, while certainly I'm able to guide my clients and, give them my thoughts, we have to be a little bit more careful about that. Mike Riley is in the fortunate position of being able to use those decades of lifetime in this area to be able to say, "Look, I've lived here all these years. I've worked on houses. I've seen the progressions of the neighborhoods." And, he also consults with me on the back end. And, you're able to give a lot of insight into that kind of stuff where I can't really cross certain lines.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And we're not even talking about the old-fashioned block-busting red line that I grew up in the 60s, where I saw my family neighborhood just destroyed with white flight. We're not talking about white flight here. We're not talking, because that doesn't exist in Cleveland. It's such a diverse community. What you're talking about is more, where is, especially given Zoom and the virus and working remotely, where more people are filtering out of downtown, and they are looking to, they don't have to commute downtown anymore. They can maybe commute maybe once a week, go into the office, and they want to work remotely. All right, where do they want to work remotely? Well, someplace close to a coffee shop, walk out their house, get some takeout. There are a lot of pockets of my area of Cleveland Heights, Shaker, Pepper Pike, where you can start to see the evolution and change in retail as these stores come back and what they look like. Because there is going to be a demand for people to get out of their house if they're working remotely and walk somewhere to
Right.
get a coffee, walk the dog, maybe sit outside in the 8 months out of the year when Cleveland is really a great place to just sit outside. So understanding the nuances of those neighborhoods and where to target your money is going to be key. And also, I should add, what is the kind of tenant you want to have in there? You want to get somebody who's got obviously some good credit, pays their bills on time, I think more professional, as opposed to somebody who's their life's in chaos. You're not sure 1 month to the next whether you're going to get your rent. It's just more than a credit check. So usually the people that are moving into these ascending neighborhoods are going to make that neighborhood better. And you can smell that. It's not something that's going to show up in an MLS or going through a realtor where every street looks the same. And I know you so throw some more disclaimers.
Well,
or add to that.
I think that was perfect. And, and it made me remember a conversation we had on a previous podcast where we talked about, a certain we're not saying there's good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. We're just saying, look, they're just different. And we talked about a part of Cleveland Heights where, look, if you want to buy duplexes where there's lots of renters and it's more of a rental grade neighborhood, hey, that's what you're going to buy if you buy here. But if you want to buy something where the population looks more like this, like you were saying, more people who tend to stay for a long time. They're not transient like renters tend to be in multifamily homes. We just know what the different neighborhoods look like. And that's what you're talking about. You talk about Royal Heights, and yes, I agree that neighborhood, it's still going to rise. But I think the big boom of appreciation has already occurred in the Royal Heights. But talk about a stable, solid neighborhood. That's a wonderful neighborhood. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about when we talk about boots on the ground, experience, and guidance as it pertains to different types of homes, different types of neighborhoods, even the differences between buying single family and multifamily. Everyone says, oh, I love multifamily homes. Find me a 3-family, Mike, because the cash flow is higher. Yes, on paper, a cash flow is higher potentially on a 3-family home, but do you factor in things, the intangibles like turnover? You could have a single family home where your tenants are long-term, there's no turnover, as opposed to your transient type tenants you get in a 3-family, or the Airbnb model that we've talked about so many times, where it's a higher return because you have that hands-on management constantly renting it out for a week, a month, 2 months at a time. So these are the nuances that we're talking about, that micro targeting, but where do you buy an Airbnb? It has to be in these locations where you were talking about. Yeah, you can't just buy an Airbnb anywhere and expect people to rent it out.
Right. No disrespect to your industry, Mike, but I'm starting to realize after we have the last couple of years bought our own properties, I can see where, again, getting back to that concept of micro targeting, where it's almost like you drop a rock into a pond and those ripples go out. Okay, well, let's take a hot area like the Royal Heights. Well, what's happening is, or what happened in New York. New York's a great example. I've been going to New York for over 35 years with my wife. And I've seen New York just change, the neighborhoods change. And of course, what happens in gentrification, it's always that ripple effect. So when you look at the Royal Heights, like you looked at Brooklyn, as Brooklyn, Park Slope, 25 years ago, if you had bought in Park Slope, you'd buy a 4-bedroom brownstone you probably could have bought it for 100,000. Now it's worth 5 million. But the neighborhoods pushing out from Park Slope in Brooklyn that used to be war zones are now hot areas, gentrification. And so that same dynamic is happening in Cleveland, where the neighborhoods on the edge of those hot areas are the ones over the next 5 years that are going to start stabilizing and gentrifying. As long as they have that mix of you can walk somewhere, you can walk your dog, you've got a place to go get a cup of coffee. I think those are the intangibles you look for.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's interesting because I think the level of speculation varies as well. So I'll give you an example of a neighborhood that I have a lot of investors ask me about, and it's Slavic Village. Slavic Village, I used to own rental properties down there, and I can tell you I had a pretty miserable experience with my property there. The city has poured a ton of money into that area, and so everyone's hot on it. I have to tell you, I'm not as optimistic. Now, could it come back and become a great walkable neighborhood like Ohio City and Tremont? I guess, but I think it's a long shot. And I'm comfortable saying that. I'm not saying don't buy there. I think that Slavic Village is a fine neighborhood. A lot of history there, a lot of interesting stuff going on. But is it going to be a home run for real estate investment? My opinion is probably not. It could be, though. So these opinions are just our opinions, but certainly lots of history and experience to go with them.
Right, and I want to make sure I don't get back to that duplex triplex, because the real danger of getting into a duplex is in an area where all of a sudden you're going to be dealing with fights among tenants, first floor and second floor. That is something that I noticed with a property that we were asked to help manage. This person bought this duplex in Cleveland Heights. This is actually in a great neighborhood. The guy on the first floor, they inherited this tenant. The guy had some mental issues, and he would, at 3 a.m., he would be screaming.
Wow.
And this guy, this poor landlord, was stuck with him. What was the upshot of that? You could not get anybody to live on the second floor. We had somebody come in, a person that actually worked for our company. They were looking for a place closer to work. I said, hey, why don't you just try this out? Within a week, they were gone.
Wow.
Police have been called. I remember years ago, there was this great side-by-side in Cleveland, Edgewater Park, where you had a lady and her husband. This lady was a Karen. I mean, if she thought she owned the house, and she was getting into arguments with every tenant that came in on the other side. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, this was probably 10 years ago. So this is when we were starting to get our feet wet. But the duplex that we own is an Airbnb. And when you're paying $2,500 a month for a furnished first floor and then $2,500 for the second floor, the quality of tenant you're getting in is super professional. First of all, most of the time they're not even there because they're commuting back to home over the weekend. If they are there, I mean, they're working 12 hours a day. And we've owned that property. That's the Linfield property that Mike.
Oh,
we've
right.
owned that property as an Airbnb the last 4 years. It's been a home run. The other thing about Airbnb is the location. So I would not buy a duplex if you're looking at long-term tenants. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. As a Airbnb, yes, depending on the location. So again, part of our micro-targeting is, all right, what do we want from this? When you put your money down, what are you looking for? What's the combinations that are going to work? And what do you have to have lined up in terms of property managers? So I'm going off on the rails here. Get me back on the track here, Mike.
Definitely, talking about this micro targeting, it's not just neighborhoods, it's type of property, and then of course it all comes full circle back to assemble your team before you invest, so having the right people in place before you invest. And I think just like any investment, if you sit down with an investment advisor, the first thing that they talk about is, what are your goals? What are the goals of your investment? What are you looking to do? And it's the same thing when buying real estate. You can't just go and say, well, I've heard that multifamily in Cleveland proper is the way to go. Well, why? It may be for what your goals are, but then again, it may not be. And so that's why it's so important to have this consultation to really understand what your goals are. And let's get you pointed in the right direction from day one, because again, as we've heard in past podcasts, how many stories do we have, Mike, where someone got off in the wrong direction? They got set off on the wrong foot, and then they have to backtrack, dig out of the hole they're in, and then start over. Why make that mistake?
Right.
That's up right
exactly.
there.
Yeah. And I think just because it's like saying, well, I want to buy real estate. That's like saying, well, I want to buy stocks in the stock market.
Right.
No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You're gonna be the babe in the woods coming in, and you're gonna get crushed. And we have seen, you had this one podcast a couple months ago. I remember one listener was telling me what you said. This guy got shot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my Israeli he got shot in Mount Pleasant, and of course on the Israeli news, one of my clients said, "Hey, I saw one of your clients got shot, but the translation wasn't right. It said he got shot in a Pleasant neighborhood, and it was the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. Obviously something got lost in the translation."
Right. Yeah. Really do your homework. The money, I don't want to look at it's a self-serving podcast, but that 275, it's going to be, you will save, besides the prospect of getting shot, you'll also save a lot of money in terms of your investment.
Yeah.
So
and it's just not necessarily getting shot really, but figuratively. I mean, it's a great analogy for what we're talking about. Maybe you don't get shot, but do you want to have that heartache, that experience of starting down the wrong road and then having to backtrack and start over?
Right. And well, let's put it this way, your wallet won't get shot up.
Right.
Maybe that's another way of looking at it. But again, So, all right. Well, look we're going to get a few more interesting people to get a little deeper dive on our micro targeting on our next episode. I think I'm going to have our engineer Amari, who's a young millennial, also maybe even Dante, and these people can give a bird's eye view of what they're looking for when they rent. Because these are again young guys, great guys who work in our organization who don't want to own a car. They don't want to own a car, and guess what? They don't want to own a house. All right. So what are they looking for in terms of rents? And we'll get their perspective, and that'll give a better context of what everybody should be looking for when they invest in Cleveland. All right.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, it may not just be the lowest price, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Mike. All right. We'll let you go. And folks, we'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. Find all our episodes on our website, www.riley-properties.com, or find us on your favorite streaming service like Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and more.